Okay. Well, welcome everyone to today's webinar, GBX webinar. Today we are very lucky and honored to have a renowned speaker, Mr. Amr El Henawy, who is going to talk to us about a topic that's really dear to me, international relations, how to forge connections between people, between cities, between cultures. So I would like to start by thanking Winston for inviting me to moderate this seminar. It's really my honor. And then I would like to introduce our speaker for today. For those of you who are not familiar, Mr. Amr El Henawy is an experienced professional in international relations, tourism, business. He was an Egyptian ambassador to, was it Slovakia?
Slovakia, yes.
Yes, and as well as Consul General in London and most recently in Hong Kong. He's done a lot of work in terms of bringing different people together, and I would like to, and I'm looking forward to learning from him today, as well as you all are, I'm sure. So thank you for joining us today. Good morning to those of you who are in Hong Kong, who are in China and other parts of Asia. Good afternoon and good evening to those of you who are in other parts of the world. So welcome, everyone. Before we start, I would like to say just a few things about how we may want to run this webinar. We have a few topics that Mr. El Henawy would like to share with us today, but please don't wait for the Q&A session. Perhaps you can type in your questions in the chat. The chat is available, I believe, to everyone. And as we go, we will be addressing those questions. We'll be keeping an eye on the questions that are coming in. Okay, so some of the topics that we're going to look at are MENA. What is MENA? Why should we care about MENA and China, MENA and GBA as well? And most importantly, how do we connect? How do we connect people to people, cities to cities, cultures to cultures? So this is our agenda for today. Thank you once again for joining us. Without further ado, I'd like to pass this to Mr. Amr El Henawy. A warm welcome.
Svetlana, thank you. Thanks very much for this great opportunity. Can you hear me well? Can everyone hear? Okay, perfect. Yeah. Winston, it's a pleasure to see you online again until we meet in person. I thank you very much for this opportunity. And what we'll try to just very quickly touch upon is the so-called MENA region, Middle East and North Africa, and how that relates or could relate to the GBA region for the foreseeable future, hopefully. Yeah. I just went through a very elementary basic definition of what MENA countries are or include. And MENA is I don't know, so maybe it's a political term, an academic term, sort of a grouping that a lot of the international. So yeah, here's the map of what MENA could be. Now, there's many different interpretations of what this geographical group, which has a lot in common in terms of maybe culture, language. So it has quite a few things in common, and also some not so common aspects of the countries that are part of this classification. This classification, if you look it up even within the UN working specialized agencies, it will differ from 20 to 22, depending on which countries you include in this so-called area. It can be called MENAT, M-E-N-A-T, when you add Turkey, but Turkey being part of Europe sometimes is not included in MENA. So MENA comes originally from the Middle East. Middle East, as we all, most of you know, is a term that was used, again, academically to identify, or politically to identify, what the East is from the Western perspective. Far East, Near East, and then we have the Middle East. I don't want to go into the academic part. I'm just touching through over this very quickly to show what potential there is from this classification, and how it kind of almost sort of fits within the Belt and Road, and how the GBA area as a new classification itself within China would be then eligible to forge ties with this region, because at the geopolitical bigger perspective, China has had very good relations and very strong relations. I have a very quick statistic that I found today with the Economist. It's a 3-minute video that shows the amount of potential between. It comes later, Svetlana. It's the link with I think it's slide number 4 or 5. It shows what China's relationship with that region is, and my mission is to try to find how the GBA area and south of China can actually benefit also from this geopolitical new world that we are experiencing. So this new area, the maps, of course, have a lot of political intrigue in between them. There are border issues between some of these MENA countries, but we will try to just focus on the prospect of like possibilities available for people to people, which will then enhance more cultural connections, which will lead to more business and future sort of dynamic of the whole world stage. It's not always east-west. I'm going as far as say that this is like some sort of east-east corridor or new form of cooperation that was not we were not exposed to in the past. But of course, we're going from the reference of the West. So maybe if we can go to the next slide. You can see from this map here that the North African countries tie MENA to Africa, the African continent. So to some extent, it's a very good entry also for the GBA business or connections to have an entry into an area that they originally was just not, there was not a lot of interaction with the African countries. So Egypt and Morocco have a lot of free trade agreements that can give access to the continent and the connection. Morocco, Egypt, and Algeria. I'm leaving Libya out because they are unstable politically at the moment. These countries are the southern basin of the Mediterranean. So if you are looking in investing or talking about food security or energy security of the future for the continent of Africa, and also that affects in a drastic manner, actually, the food security and the energy security of Europe, then understanding this region and its dynamic and forging better ties will yield a lot more benefits to the GBA region. The eastern part of this MENA part, which is the Gulf, essentially, it is called the new cooperation or the new form of ties that China has with the so-called Middle East is really mostly economically centered on the Gulf countries. We've all, I think we're all aware of how keen everyone in the world now is into tapping into the resources, the financial resources of the Gulf. So the interest really of this new dynamic has a lot to do with the economic power of the Gulf. This is just a sort of a big picture of just identifying what MENA, why I think MENA is useful as a region to talk about, and how it connects with the Middle East, which is a political term that is being used now in a more economic fashion. And it really actually talks about a few countries, which are the Gulf countries, because when you see, this is all, of course, the bigger context is the East-West relations between China and the West. And in terms of political and historical ties between China and this region, you have very good cooperation with Iran, with what used to be Iraq, with all these countries. But economically, this corridor or this bridge has not yielded below the institutional part. So you have oil, you have these big commodities that have been traded with China, but not necessarily benefited the communities in terms of how they can get more trade and more business that is not only directed at the West, at the Western markets. We will leave the bigger MENA out of the picture now, which includes Turkey and some of the Stan countries, Kazakhstan, and most of these countries are quite rich in terms of natural resources. I'll come back to that later. Yeah, I'll leave it at that for now. Can we go to the next slide, please, Svetlana? Thank you very much. Very kind. So yeah, so this is the, again, I'm trying to draw the whole sort of purpose of our this beautiful morning that I'm enjoying with you is to just make a geographical connection of how the western border of China now extends in its increasingly influential international role as a superpower. So most of these countries were all part of the South after World War II in the 20th century. All these countries, including China, sat on the same bench of South and North dialogue, and North being here the Western, supposedly so-called developed world. China has done amazingly well in terms of its development and resources. So now these countries and part of the Belt and Road Initiative are now part of the new 21st century dynamic that we're witnessing in the moment, in my opinion. So the referral of Middle East, North Africa, or the MENA and what have you, all of this region always has shared a number of cultural and economic similarities. They were just never allowed, in my opinion, to flourish or develop between our cultures and countries. So I mean, you could see the slide. We can go to the next one. So again, this is just to try to understand that now this bridge between this part of the world is going to be extremely essential within the East-West relations between the United States of America and China. We were always part of colonialism, post-colonialism, world wars. I think in Asia, you were spared some of that. And now we can finally decide and have more ability to form a new order. And when I came to Hong Kong, I realized that we have not had a chance to know each other. I grew up in I grew up all over the world. I was born in Europe. I was educated in many different parts. I went to Australia. And professionally, I worked in Latin America. I worked in Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, as it's called, and many times in Europe. And when I finally was privileged to come and work in Asia, I saw everything that they didn't tell us about China. It's very, very modern. It's we all knew it. It's just because of the language and the soft power and the media, a lack of interaction between human people apart from tourism, just didn't sort of click in. How are we going to make that connection work more? So that's where I came up with the idea of that we needed a geographical region to be represented in Hong Kong, which to me is a very great gateway to the mainland in China. And how do we set up a format where they would exchange for the benefit of our businesses or our citizens that are here? They don't have a chamber of commerce. They don't have an association. They don't have a cultural center. So I thought if we could then build on this well, there always has to be a format where they meet. And the GBA is still not very well known to that region. It is still considered as part of China, and China is so big that it is sometimes slightly difficult to understand, or it's very difficult because it's huge from our perspective. So that's where the idea of this whole MENA idea to start it, and then from there, how does that then influence or help to promote the relationship? Now, tell me when you want to cut off with the first part, because I don't want to go on for too long. Please, Winston, when just give me a time frame that we can.
I think we can continue.
Okay.
Until you use your your video. Sometimes a video has a copyright, so I want to cut it off before that, in case YouTube would not allow me to.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't look into that. It's mostly showing the numbers that are being created between China and the Gulf Council countries. And the point that why I included it was to just sort of, the last few months here in Hong Kong, I noticed that people couldn't sort of use Middle East as a term, but the interest of the mainland, or not the interest, but their political interest, or actually already existing strong ties, is mostly with some of those countries, not the whole Middle East itself, because the Middle East itself was polarized always through East and West of the Cold War between the USSR and the USA after World War II. So they were always had to choose between East or West. And so then, for example, you have Israel, which is considered to be a Western style democracy. So from that perspective, then it has to be an enemy of the East and cannot be an ally of the East. And now that we're embarking into a much more evolved international system, very different in the 21st century, both the United States of America and China now, not Russia to the same extent as the USSR, are also looking for allies. And these allies are countries with big demographic influence in terms of markets, location, like Egypt on the Suez Canal, which is the route to all the shipping lanes. Iran as an old culture and very influential with its zone. So you have all these strategic players which need to be allies of either the West or the East in its new format. So, but then the economy, I think, changes this game a lot, because the Gulf countries, which I think the new relationship is based on, which it's what's in the video that I was attached, with their economic power and their ability now to sort of try to liberate themselves a little bit of the Western influence, because they were completely dominated and influenced by the Western Bretton Woods, if you want to call it, the machine, the Western money machine, IMF and the World Bank, what have you. They're finally making choices, and they're making choices of where to invest and how to go with the future, and they're looking to China. And China is looking to them for strong allies and markets, much better than the markets that you and possibilities that you have in Europe, especially if Europe continue this, or we continue with this trade war. You need new allies. So what is called here in this region now, this rush to go and try to see how to benefit from the so-called Middle East, really, in my opinion, relies on Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Egypt for its not for its economy at the moment, but for its potential geographic position and other factors of its ability as a geopolitical strategic anchor. Iran is a very strong ally of the East, if you want to call it, China, and not of the West. So later, maybe we can also think about the BRICS a little bit. But what I'm trying to dissect here is why this region is important, and which countries in this region are the ones that could benefit this new dynamic, world dynamic. And if the economy starts getting more layers, more people start getting comfortable with each other, more businesses are reaching these countries, then the GBA, not China, as everyone just, so there's a confusion of what is institutional, what is country to country, what is political, and how you can forge ties between people on day-to-day basis. So I don't know if the video works fine. It's just you can play it later. It's an open source.
Shall we try the video now?
Okay. Yeah. So if you want to start the video, let me close this part, so at least I can make sure that there's no copyright.
Yeah, well, I'm happy also to if Svetlana, if you're comfortable, I mean, I'll take some of your angles, please, to do that. And if anyone has any questions to what they want to know more than what I wanted to present, I'm very happy to do that too.
Okay, well, I'm looking for the video, and I am not sure which slide the video is on.
It's the one with just the link, the next one. Yeah, this one. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a video on FT this morning. I don't know. Just I think it's an ad. It just gives a few numbers just for to see where the focus is, mostly on this new world that we're as my Egyptian friend was talking about, that the new north coast in Egypt, Alamein, is like the United Arab Emirates. So it's all coming together in that sense.
So let me close this recording.